I'll never forget the first night Titan bared his teeth at me. Marissa stepped out of the sleek black car in front of the hotel, her gown flowing like she had rehearsed walking down the aisle. Her smile was enough to melt my chest for a moment, to quiet every storm I had carried inside. But then Titan lunged. The bulldog snapped at my trouser leg, his jaws locking like iron, his growl low and guttural, more like a warning than an animal's sound. Marissa laughed nervously, tugging the leash. "Titan, stop," she scolded, but I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't just reacting. He knew something I didn't. I brushed it off, forcing a smile, walking with her into the grand lobby of the hotel. Chandeliers glimmered overhead, the staff bowed politely, and her voice bubbled with excitement as she hummed about tomorrow's wedding. But all I could think about was the way that dog's eyes burned into mine. Not like a pet meeting his owner's fiancée, more like an enemy staking his ground. That was the first sign, and I ignored it. The sweet Marissa led me into looked like something from a dream. Balloons floating, petals scattered across the sheets, wine glinting golden on the table. She gasped, covering her mouth with joy. "It's perfect, Elias," she whispered, throwing her arms around me. I held her tightly, but my eyes drifted past her shoulder. Titan sat in the corner, silent, unblinking, watching. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "I love you, babe." I said the same words back, but the hollowness inside me rang louder than the music of her voice. When my phone buzzed, I seized the chance to escape, stepping out into the hallway where Jack and the groomsmen waited, arms full of roses and balloons. "She'll love this," Jack grinned. I forced a smile. I prayed he was right. We walked down the hall toward her door, my chest tight with anticipation. But before I could knock, I froze. Her laughter spilled through the crack beneath the door, light and careless, cutting through me like a knife. "Can you believe Elias doesn't want Titan after the wedding?" she said into her phone, her voice mocking. "He thinks the dog is too aggressive. He doesn't even realize Titan is jealous. That dog thinks I'm his baby." The men chuckled softly, thinking it was nothing, but then her words changed. They sharpened. "Elias is too weak. Too boring. If it wasn't for his money, I'd have left months ago. I'll marry him, then divorce him and take half. That's the plan. And after that, I'll go back to Damon, the only man I've ever really loved." The roses fell from my hand, scattering across the floor. My knees nearly buckled. Jack's smile froze when he saw my face. I turned, my chest hollow, my world cracking into shards. Her voice still floated behind the door like poison. "Too weak. Just for the money? Damon is the one." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet until it blurred into shadows. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard her again. "I'll marry him, take half, and then Damon." Shame weighed heavier than heartbreak. My family was already here. Thousands of dollars gone. How could I face them? How could I tell the truth? Jack banged on my door, begging to talk, but I sat silent, broken. By the time the sun rose, I wasn't the same man who had walked into that hotel. The wedding hall shimmered like a palace. Chandeliers lit the air, guests leaned forward with excitement, cameras flashed. Marissa walked down the aisle, radiant, smiling like the queen she believed herself to be. She whispered sweetness into my ear, but my chest was steel. My silence cut deeper than any reply. When the officiator lifted his book, I raised my hand. "Wait," I said. My voice was steady. I asked for the microphone. The guests erupted with cheers, expecting romance. Marissa's smile widened. But instead of music, I gave a signal. Her own voice filled the hall, echoing over the speakers. "Elias can't satisfy me like Titan does. I'll marry him, then divorce him, and take half of everything. Damon is the only man I truly love." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones shot into the air. Some covered their mouths, others turned in disgust. Marissa's legs gave out. She crumpled to the marble floor, her bouquet scattering. I slid on my sunglasses, not to look cool but to hide the tears fighting to spill. Without a word, I turned my back and walked out. Alone. Before we go deeper, don't just sit there. Hit the hype button right now. It's YouTube's new super like, and you can only use it 3 times a week. When you hype this video, it tells YouTube to push this story further, to let more people see what betrayal really looks like. So hype it, like it, subscribe, and I'll press that hype button too. Because the storm that follows here deserves to go viral. The moment I stepped out of that hall, the roar of voices turned into silence. My footsteps echoed against the marble floors, each one heavier than the last. Behind me, Marissa's collapse was swallowed by chaos. Shouts, gasps, the clatter of chairs tipping over. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My chest was a storm barely contained. In the hotel suite, I closed the door and slid down against it, my suit still pristine, but inside I was rubble. I tore the sunglasses from my face and pressed my palms into my eyes. The sobs came hard and fast, racking my chest until my body shook. People knocked, Jack, my mother, even strangers who thought comfort could stitch betrayal. I stayed silent. There were no words for what she had done to me. Morning crept in with cruel light, spilling across the carpet, golden and mocking. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Headlines screamed my shame before I could even stand. The groom who exposed his bride. Pictures of Marissa fainting flooded social feeds. To the world I was entertainment. To myself I was hollow. I stared at the bathroom mirror, my reflection a stranger. My eyes red, my jaw slack. Yesterday I was meant to be a husband. Today I was a headline. Family tried to pull me up. Elias, eat something, you'll heal. But every voice sounded like pity, and pity cut deeper than knives. I couldn't stand their looks, their whispers, their half-smiles hiding shame. Weeks passed, and whispers turned into echoes that followed me everywhere. In coffee shops, people tilted their heads. At gas stations, I heard chuckles when they thought I couldn't hear. Even Jack's company felt heavy with pity. I didn't want pity. I wanted quiet. One morning I packed a bag. No designer clothes, no watch, just worn jeans, shirts, and shoes that had seen better days. I left no note, no explanation. I simply disappeared. The further the city shrank in my rearview mirror, the lighter my chest felt. Not healed, not whole, but breathing. The town I chose was quiet, the kind of place where neighbors waved to strangers and life moved with slower clocks. My house was small, its paint peeling, its windows rattling with the wind. But it was mine. One afternoon, crossing a muddy street, a car sped past me, sending dirty water splashing high into the air. It drenched me head to toe. I froze, humiliation flooding me again like poison. But then the car screeched to a stop. A young woman jumped out, her face pale with guilt. "I'm so sorry," she cried, hurrying toward me. She pulled a towel from the back seat, her hands trembling as she tried to wipe the mud from my shirt. "It's fine," I muttered, but her eyes, warm, honest, wide, made me pause. Most people would have laughed and driven on. She didn't. She stayed. "Please forgive me," she whispered. I nodded. She rushed back into her car, her dress fluttering in the wind, and drove off. I didn't even know her name, but I knew I wouldn't forget her. Weeks later, fate brought her back. I stepped out of a small mall with groceries, and there she was, standing by the entrance with a friend, laughing. Sunlight lit her smile, her hair tied up in a bun. Our eyes met. She gasped softly, then smiled. "Oh, it's you," she said. I laughed. "Yeah, it's me. The guy you nearly drowned in mud." Her friend chuckled. "This is June," she said, pointing beside her. "And I'm Celine." Celine. The name felt like it belonged in a different story, a gentler one. We talked for minutes that stretched into something longer. When I asked for her number, she handed me her phone without hesitation. That night, sitting alone in my dimly lit room, I stared at her contact on my screen. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something I hadn't felt in months. A spark. The next morning my phone lit up with a simple message. "Good morning, Elias." It came from Celine, and though the words were ordinary, they burned brighter than the sun through my window. For weeks I had drowned in silence, but now my days began with her voice. Soon it became a rhythm. Morning texts, evening calls, laughter filling the cracks of my loneliness. She asked questions about my life. Where I came from. What I did. I gave her only fragments of truth, never lies, but never the whole story. I wasn't ready to bleed out my past to someone who had only just walked into it. She didn't press. She simply listened. And that was enough. Some nights I lay in bed, the cracked ceiling above me, and realized her voice had become the thread holding my days together. Yet even as warmth returned, doubt lingered. Could this be real? Or was I setting myself up to be fooled again? When she finally agreed to see me in person, she added something unexpected. "Do you mind if June comes along? She's my best friend." I hesitated, but forced a smile she couldn't see through the phone. Of course. That Saturday I polished my old car, though nothing could hide the scratches or dull paint. When I pulled up outside her house, I saw her peeking through the window. The smile that had colored my imagination vanished from her face. She whispered something to June, who urged her forward. Celine rolled her eyes but came anyway, her perfume drifting into the car as she slid into the back seat. June settled into the front beside me, warm and polite. I greeted them both. June responded easily. Celine barely murmured. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I just wanted the night to work. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet, sunlight pouring through wide windows. I ordered rice and water. June did the same. Celine leaned back, crossing her arms, and rattled off a list that made the waiter raise his brows. Rice, chicken, fish, salad, dessert, and their most expensive wine. I forced a smile, pretending not to notice June's glance. When the food arrived, Celine snapped photos of the plates, laughing as if this were her throne. I picked carefully at my small dish, each bite heavy with calculation. When the bill came, dread washed over me. I was short. I leaned close to Celine, whispering, "Please, just a little to cover it." Her face twisted, her voice rising enough for nearby tables to hear. "You brought us out knowing you couldn't pay?" Laughter rippled from somewhere behind us. My cheeks burned. June shifted, clearly embarrassed for me. She slipped bills from her purse, trying to hand them to Celine beneath the table. Celine folded her arms, refusing. June sighed, leaned across, and pressed the money into my hand herself. I whispered thanks, my throat dry, shame clinging to me like a second skin. We left in silence. My car rattled as I started it, Celine staring out the window like a queen trapped in a peasant's carriage. June tried to speak, but the air was heavy. At a stoplight, a white luxury car slid up beside us. Its engine purred like a predator. The driver, a tall man with a gold chain and tinted shades, leaned out with a grin. "Hey, pretty," he called, his eyes fixed on Celine. "Can I get your number?" Celine's face lit up. Without hesitation, she opened the door, heels clacking against the asphalt. They spoke like old friends, laughing, exchanging numbers while traffic honked and lights shifted. I gripped the wheel, staring forward, the world blurring around me. When she climbed back into the car, she didn't explain. She didn't need to. June clenched her fists, biting her lip. I kept driving. Silence was my only defense. That night, when I dropped them off, Celine barely muttered a goodbye before slipping into her house. June lingered by the car. Her eyes burned with something between anger and sorrow. "What she did tonight," she whispered, "was wrong. You don't deserve that, Elias." I tried to shrug it off. "It's fine." "No, it's not fine. She humiliated you in front of strangers. She gave her number to another man right in front of you. That's not fine." Her words landed heavy because they weren't pity, they were truth. Her voice softened. "You're better than this. Don't let her convince you otherwise." She walked away, leaving me staring at the empty passenger seat. For the first time since Marissa's betrayal, I realized humiliation wasn't only what others did to me. Sometimes I allowed it to stay. Despite everything, I kept answering Celine's calls. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was hope. I told myself she was testing me, that her walls would crumble once she saw my heart. June's warning echoed, but I buried it. One evening, after we had spoken for nearly an hour, I asked her quietly, "If one day I asked you to marry me, would you say yes?" There was silence. Then a laugh. Not a soft one. A cruel one. "Marry you? Like this? With what? Gas money?" She laughed harder, as though my words were the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "You think you could build a life with me? Please." I froze, my heart clawing inside my chest. And then, as if fate had staged it, June walked into the room. She looked at Celine, then at me. Celine smirked. "Can you believe he asked me to marry him?" she scoffed. "If you love him so much, June, why don't you marry him yourself?" June's eyes didn't flinch. She met mine, steady and unwavering. "I would," she said softly. Her words held me up when everything else inside me collapsed. The next day, the white car returned. Damon stepped out like a showman, bags of designer clothes in both hands. Perfume bottles, shiny shoes, velvet boxes. Celine screamed with delight, throwing herself at him as if she'd been waiting for his arrival all her life. I stood awkwardly on the porch, invisible. Damon's smirk found me immediately. "This the poor guy?" he asked, loud enough for the street. Celine laughed, hooking her arm through his. "Yes. He actually thought he could propose to me." The words pierced me, but before I could even react, June stepped forward. "That's enough," she snapped. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the moment like glass. "You don't get to insult him." Damon raised his brows. "And who are you?" "Someone who values people by their heart, not their wallet," she shot back. Celine scoffed, Damon chuckled. I lowered my head, too hollow to speak. Silence became my armor again. After they drove away, June stayed with me. We sat on the porch in quiet, the night sky stretching wide overhead. Neither of us spoke for a long while. Finally, she whispered, "Don't let them crush you, Elias. You're not worthless. Don't let their voices be the only ones you hear." Her hand brushed mine, light but grounding. I turned, searching her face, and for the first time in months, I saw something steady and real. She didn't pity me. She saw me. But with that realization came fear. I had been fooled once, then twice. Could I trust again? Could I trust her? June didn't push. She just stayed, telling me stories of her childhood, the smell of wet earth after rain, the music her father used to play on old vinyl. Small things that grounded me in a world that had spun off its axis. When she finally rose to leave, I whispered, "Thank you." She looked back with a faint smile before disappearing into the night. Days turned into weeks, and June became a quiet flame in my dark world. She brought me shirts when mine grew too worn, a wristwatch she thought I'd like, snacks she knew I favored. Once, when I was short on rent, she pressed folded bills into my hand, never asking when I'd return them. She laughed with me, listened to me, stood by me in ways Celine never did. Celine's calls grew fewer, and when they came, they were sharp, filled with demands and complaints. I answered out of habit, not hope. But June filled the silences with warmth. Still, I kept my secret. She didn't know I had once been wealthy. She didn't know I had chosen this quiet life to escape the stares, the pity, the whispers. To her, I was just another man trying to survive. And maybe that was enough. One evening, I called June. My voice was steady, but my heart trembled. "Dress nicely," I told her. "I want to take you somewhere special." She laughed softly. "What's the occasion?" "You'll see." The next day, as the sun dipped low, a line of black SUVs rolled down her street. Engines purred, neighbors spilled onto porches, whispering in awe. June stood frozen in her peach dress, the wind tugging at her hair. The door of the lead car opened and I stepped out. Not in worn shoes or faded jeans, but in a tailored navy suit, shoes polished, a watch glinting on my wrist. June's eyes widened. "Elias." I walked toward her, steady. "I'm not who you think I am," I said softly. "I was never poor. I just needed to know, would someone love me for me, not for what I have?" Her lips parted, her eyes trembling. All this time? All this time. The convoy pulled away from June Street and carried us into the heart of the city. She sat beside me in silence, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap, her eyes darting from the tinted windows to me. I could feel her questions pressing like weight against the air, but she held them back. When we stopped in front of the grandest hotel in town, she finally whispered, "Why are we here?" I turned to her, my chest tightening. "Because it's time you saw who I really am." We stepped into a ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and gold accents. Waiters moved like shadows with trays of champagne. June's mouth parted as she took it all in. "Elias, this is mine," I said softly. "This is my world. The one I walked away from." Her gaze snapped to mine, a mix of awe and hurt. "You think I would have loved you any less if I knew?" she whispered. I shook my head. I didn't want another Marissa, another Celine. I had to be sure. The night was orchestrated with precision. Invitations had been sent to the very people who had mocked me, whispered behind my back, laughed at the spectacle of my ruined wedding. And at the center of it all, two names glimmered on the guest list, Celine Hart and Damon Cross. They arrived in a whirl of perfume and arrogance. Celine clung to Damon's arm, dripping in jewels, her dress cut low, her smile sharp. Damon strutted like a man who owned the floor, shaking hands with guests, laughing too loud. They didn't notice me at first, standing in the shadows. But when their eyes finally found mine, Damon froze. Celine blinked twice, then forced a laugh. "Elias," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "You look different." "Yes," I said, stepping into the light, my suit gleaming under the chandelier. "Different tends to happen when you're no longer playing poor." Her smile faltered. Damon's smirk twitched. The room stirred. I led June to the head of the hall, where cameras had been positioned, guests poised for spectacle. "Tonight," I began, my voice carrying across the polished floors, "I want to introduce you to someone." I reached for June's hand. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. This woman stood by me when I had nothing. She saw me, not what I had. And for that, she deserves the world. Gasps rose from the crowd as Damon and Celine realized what was unfolding. Celine's eyes widened, panic flashing like lightning. Damon scowled, his jaw tightening. "But before we go forward," I said, my eyes locking on them, "I think there are truths that need to be cleared." I gestured to the screen behind us. A video began to play, not of Marissa this time, but of Celine. Recorded phone calls. Laughter with her friends. Words that burned like acid. "He actually thinks I'm interested. Please. The man can barely pay a bill. Damon is the real prize." Elias is just practice. The hall erupted. Guests turned, whispers like fire. Celine's face drained of color. Damon's smugness collapsed under the weight of exposed truth. Celine staggered forward, her voice cracking. Elias, I didn't mean. Stop, I said, my voice cold. Every word you spoke was a choice. And tonight, the world will remember those choices. Damon shoved his hands into his pockets, trying to recover. So what? You tricked her, you played poor? No, I cut him off. I tested her. And she failed. I turned my gaze fully on him. And you, Damon, you think you're untouchable. But here's the truth. You're not a king in this city. You're an employee. My employee. Gasps cracked the air. Damon's mouth opened, closed, opened again. What are you talking about? I let the silence stretch before delivering the final blow. You work for me, Damon. Every deal you've flaunted, every dollar you've paraded, it was mine before it was yours. And now consider it gone. His face crumpled. Celine stumbled back, grasping for a chair, her world collapsing faster than she could cling to it. I turned back to June. She was shaking, tears in her eyes, but her chin lifted with quiet pride. I dropped to one knee, pulling a velvet box from my pocket. Gasps rippled again, but this time they were filled with joy. June Alder, I said, my voice breaking, you showed me what love looks like when the world strips everything away. Will you marry me? She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. The hall erupted in applause. I rose, sliding the ring onto her finger, holding her close as flashes lit the air. Behind us, Celine collapsed fully, sobbing, clawing at Damon, who shoved her away in anger. Security moved swiftly, dragging them both out as their screams echoed through the grand room. And there, in the middle of the chaos, June and I stood unshaken. For the first time since Marissa's betrayal, I felt whole again. The applause still echoed in my ears long after the ballroom emptied. June's hand was warm in mine, the new ring glittering under the chandeliers. Guests left whispering about justice, about truth, about love stronger than wealth. For once, I wasn't the subject of pity or ridicule. I was the man who rose from ashes. But when the last light dimmed and June and I stood alone in that vast room, a quiet unease crept in. I knew stories like mine never ended so clean. The past has a way of clawing back when you least expect it. In the weeks that followed, June and I settled into something that felt like peace. She moved slowly into my world of suits and boardrooms, learning the rhythms of my life without fear. She didn't flinch at wealth nor cling to it. She was steady, grounding me when the noise of society threatened to roar again. For a time, I almost believed the shadows were gone. Then, one afternoon as I stepped out of the office, I saw her. Marissa. She was nothing like the woman who had once walked down the aisle, radiant and cruel. Her hair was matted, her clothes faded, her face hollow with the weight of time. She stood by the hotel entrance, clutching a mop, her uniform stained from long hours of labor. For a moment she didn't see me. She was too busy scrubbing at a mark on the floor, her shoulders slumped, her spirit ground down. When her eyes finally lifted, the mop clattered from her hands. Our gazes locked and her lips trembled. She turned, fleeing into the service corridor as if my sight alone burned her skin. I didn't chase her. I couldn't. But my chest thundered. The past had returned, not triumphant but broken. And I knew this was only the beginning. June noticed my silence that evening. What's wrong? She asked softly. I hesitated, then told her. She listened without judgment, her fingers brushing my hand. If she's back, Elias, it's for a reason, she whispered. People like Marissa don't just disappear. She'll want something. She was right. Days later, Marissa appeared again. This time not as a shadow, but standing outside my office building, waiting. She approached cautiously, eyes darting to the guards, her voice small. Elias, please. Can we talk? Every muscle in me wanted to turn away. But something in her tone, broken, desperate, stopped me. Against my better judgment, I nodded. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. Marissa's hands shook as she clutched the mug, her nails chipped, her once manicured fingers raw from work. I was wrong, she whispered. About everything. Damon, he used me. He took what little I had left and left me with nothing. I have no one, Elias. No family. No friends. No future. Please, forgive me. Her words should have softened me. Once they would have. But as she spoke, all I saw were the roses dropping from my hand the night I heard her voice behind that hotel door. Elias is too weak. Too boring. I'll marry him, then divorce him and take half. I leaned back, my chest iron. Forgive you? You broke me in ways you'll never understand. You planned to destroy me. And now you come to me because you've been destroyed yourself? Her eyes brimmed with tears. I don't want money. I just want a chance to make it right. I rose from the table, tossing a few bills onto the counter. You had your chance, I said coldly, and you threw it away. But Marissa didn't leave my world so easily. She began showing up everywhere, outside the office, near my home, at events where she had no reason to be. June grew uneasy. She's not just sorry, Elias, she warned. She's desperate. And desperation is dangerous. She was right again. One evening, returning from a dinner with June, I found my car vandalized. Tires slashed, windshield shattered, red spray paint screaming across the hood. You ruined me. The guards moved quickly, but by then I knew. Marissa's story wasn't finished. She wasn't here to beg. She was here to fight, to claw back what she thought the world had stolen from her. And this time, I wasn't the man who would sit in silence. The morning after the vandalism, I sat in my office with the city spread out behind the glass. My phone buzzed. A message. From Marissa. If you won't forgive me, then I'll make you regret it. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Once she had been my ruin. Now she wanted to be again. June found me there, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. She touched my arm. You can't let her drag you back down, she said gently. She thrives on your reaction. But I knew Marissa too well. She wasn't writing threats to be ignored. She was building something. And I had no intention of waiting for her storm to crash over me. That week, whispers began spreading in the business world. Clients hesitated. Meetings grew tense. A rumor was slithering through the city. Elias Rowan was a fraud. He was drowning in debt. His wealth wasn't his own. At first I dismissed it. Then I traced its source. Marissa. She had gone to the very people who once whispered behind my back about the wedding and fed them a new tale, one soaked in poison. Some believed her instantly, remembering the humiliation I had once suffered. Others hesitated but watched me with doubt. The sting wasn't just her lies. It was how quickly the world leaned in to hear them. When I confronted her, she smiled with cracked lips. You destroyed me, Elias. Now I'll destroy you. Let's see how your precious June feels when she realizes the man she loves is nothing but smoke. I wanted to shout, to rage, to crush her words where they stood. But I didn't. I left in silence, though fire raged in my chest. The next attack came sharper. Photos of me and June appeared online, twisted with captions Marissa had forged, the gold digger and her mark. June scrolled through them, her hands trembling, tears streaking down her cheeks. She won't stop, June whispered. She's going to keep coming until she breaks us. I pulled her close. Then we won't break. But in the quiet of night, when June finally slept, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was lying to us both. Damon reappeared then, swaggering into my office as though nothing had happened. He leaned on my desk, smirking. Looks like your little queen is making a comeback. I clenched my fist. You mean Marissa? He chuckled. She came to me begging for help. Told me she'd do anything to take you down. You think you can humiliate people without consequences? Think again. I stood slowly, the weight of my anger pressing against the floor. You're finished, Damon. I ended you once. Don't make me do it again. But his grin only widened. Then you'd better be ready, Rowan. Because she's already started. And then came the strike that cut deepest. One evening, June vanished. She didn't answer her phone. Didn't reply to messages. Hours bled into panic. Finally, a text came through, not from her but from an unknown number. If you want to see her again, meet me where it all ended. My blood ran cold. The place she meant was clear. The Grand Hotel where Titan had once sunk his teeth into my leg, where Marissa had first whispered betrayal into the phone. The place where my world collapsed. I drove there in silence, my hands gripping the wheel, my heart pounding like war drums. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was survival. The hotel was quiet when I arrived, its once bright chandeliers dim, the corridors echoing with silence. I stepped inside, every muscle coiled tight, every sense alive with dread. My footsteps dragged me back to the night my roses fell to the floor, the night my heart shattered. This place was a graveyard of memory, and now it was bait. Marissa was waiting in the grand hall. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. But when she saw me, her lips curled into a bitter smile. You came, she said softly, as if she still held some power over me. Where is she? My voice echoed against the marble. From the shadows, Damon stepped forward, dragging June by the arm. Her wrists were bound, her mouth gagged, her eyes wild with fear. My heart lurched, but I forced myself to stay still, to breathe. Damon's grin was wide and cruel. "There's our hero," he mocked. "Always running to save the girl." I wanted to rush forward, to tear June from his grip, but Damon tightened his hold, the knife in his hand glinting under the weak light. "One step closer, Rowan, and I'll make sure you leave with one less reason to fight." Marissa's laugh was brittle. "You thought you could humiliate me, destroy me, and walk away to live happily ever after? No. If I can't have peace, neither can you." Her voice cracked, desperation seeping through the venom. "You don't understand what it's like to have nothing, Elias. To wake up and realize everyone you loved has turned their back. You left me with nothing. You left yourself with nothing," I snapped. "You chose betrayal. You chose greed. And now you're reaping it." Her face twisted, rage and sorrow colliding until she looked more specter than woman. Damon shoved June forward, forcing her to stumble. She caught my eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. I clenched my fist. "What do you want?" I demanded. "Half," Marissa hissed. "Half of everything you have. What you should have given me the day we were supposed to wed. Give me that and maybe, you'll see her again." My laugh came sharp, bitter. "Half. You think money will fix the wreckage you've made of yourself? You think you can bargain with me after dragging me through hell?" Damon's knife pressed closer to June's throat. My breath hitched. The game wasn't about money. It was about breaking me. I lifted my hand slowly. "Let her go, Damon. This isn't your fight," he sneered. "Isn't it? You took everything from me. My pride, my reputation, my place in this city. If I ruin you tonight, then I get it all back." "You work for me," I said coldly. "You always did. You're not a king. You're a pawn. And pawns get sacrificed." His grin faltered just enough for me to see the crack. June's eyes widened, flicking between us, urging me with every glance not to lose myself to rage. Then the chaos erupted. June jerked suddenly, stomping on Damon's foot, twisting her body away from his grip. His knife swung wild, scraping her shoulder but missing the throat. She stumbled toward me as I lunged forward. The blade sliced the air between us, sparks flying as it clashed with the metal bar I had grabbed from a nearby table. The hall filled with echoes of clashing metal, Marissa's shrieks, June's cries. Damon's strength was raw, but mine was fueled by something stronger. Fury sharpened by betrayal, love carved out of ruin. With one final swing, I knocked the knife from his hand, sending it skidding across the marble. I grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the pillar. "This ends now," I growled. His eyes widened, fear flashing through the arrogance. Behind me, Marissa screamed, rushing for the knife. Marissa's heels screeched against the marble as she lunged for the knife. June screamed, her voice echoing through the hall, but my body was already moving. I shoved Damon hard to the floor and spun just as Marissa's fingers wrapped around the handle. She rose, her hand trembling, eyes blazing with something feral. "You ruined me, Elias," she shrieked. "You don't get to walk away whole." She charged, the blade catching the light. For a heartbeat, I saw her not as the woman I once loved, but as every betrayal, every wound, every humiliation embodied in flesh. I sidestepped, her momentum carrying her past me, and seized her wrist. The knife clattered across the floor, ringing like a final bell. Marissa collapsed, sobbing, her body convulsing with rage and grief. "I had everything," she wept. "And you took it all." "No," I said coldly, my chest heaving. "You had everything. And you threw it away." Damon groaned behind me, clutching his ribs, his arrogance stripped clean. He crawled toward the door, but security, summoned by my earlier message, burst in, pinning him down before he could escape. Marissa tried to scramble after him, but the guards caught her too, their hands firm but not cruel. June rushed into my arms, her sobs muffled against my chest. I held her tightly, my own body trembling as the adrenaline drained. For a long moment I said nothing. The echoes of the struggle hung heavy in the hall, mingling with the memory of roses, betrayal, and shame. But this time, I wasn't the broken man walking away in silence. I looked at Marissa, her hair tangled, her makeup smeared, her once perfect poise shattered. "You wanted half of everything," I said softly. "Now you have it. Half a life, half a soul, and nothing more." Her scream followed me as the guards dragged her out. The days that followed were a blur of headlines. Scorned ex-fiancé and accomplice arrested in hotel attack. The media feasted on it, but for once I didn't care. I wasn't the spectacle. They were. Damon faced charges for assault and extortion. Marissa's record swelled with attempted blackmail and conspiracy. Their names became symbols of downfall, mine of survival. But even as justice played out in the courts, my revenge didn't feel like triumph. It felt like silence, like standing over a battlefield where the smoke cleared and the bodies lay still. I had won, yes, but at what cost? June was my anchor. She stayed at my side when the cameras flashed, when the lawyers spoke, when the city whispered. She held my hand not as someone clinging to power, but as someone tethering me to life itself. One evening, weeks later, I returned to the hotel alone. The ballroom stood empty, the chandeliers dim. I walked to the spot where Marissa had once laughed into her phone, where roses had slipped from my hands, where my life had split in two. I closed my eyes. I saw her smile, Titan's growl, Damon's sneer. I heard the voices that had mocked me, the whispers that had followed me through streets and shops. And then I opened my eyes to the silence. None of it mattered anymore. Revenge hadn't healed me, but it had freed me. On the night June and I finally wed, the air was heavy with a different kind of silence. Peaceful, sacred. She walked toward me, her eyes steady, her smile unshaken. There was no dog growling, no secret phone calls, no knives waiting in the shadows. Only us. When she reached me, I whispered, "You saved me." She shook her head gently. "No, Elias. You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." The vows passed like breaths, and when we sealed them, the applause that rose was not the roar of spectacle, but the hum of love, of truth, of survival. I had walked through fire and come out scarred, yes, but not burned away. And as I held June's hand, I knew the final chapter was waiting, not in the halls of revenge, but in the quiet of a life rebuilt. The weeks after our wedding felt like walking into sunlight after years underground. June and I moved into a quiet home at the edge of the city, where the noise of gossip couldn't reach us. The garden was small, but she filled it with roses, laughing as though she was reclaiming the symbol that once haunted me. I would stand at the doorway watching her kneel in the soil and think to myself, this is what survival looks like. I still carried scars. Some nights I woke gasping, sweat soaking my sheets, Marissa's laughter echoing in my ears, Damon's knife flashing before my eyes. June would hold me until the storm passed, whispering that it was over. Maybe it would never truly be over, but with her voice anchoring me, I learned to breathe again. Months later, the trials concluded. Damon received years in prison, his empire dismantled piece by piece. Marissa was sentenced to less. Her lawyers painted her as broken, desperate, unhinged. But her punishment wasn't the cell. It was the headlines, the whispers, the loss of every mask she had once worn. She became what she feared most, irrelevant. I attended none of the hearings. I didn't need to. Revenge had already played out, not in the courtroom but in the silence of my refusal to even watch her fall. Sometimes victory isn't striking back. It's walking away and knowing they can never touch you again. One evening, June and I returned to the old hotel. Not for memories, not for ghosts, but for closure. The ballroom was being renovated, stripped of its chandeliers and marble, the air thick with dust and sawdust. Workers moved around us, too busy to care who we were. I stood in the center of that room, the very place my world had collapsed, and I smiled. Not because of what happened there, but because I was still standing. Because life had given me a second chance and I had taken it. June slipped her hand into mine, her smile quiet but fierce. Together we walked out. And for the first time I didn't look back. Peace didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to let the past own me. Some scars would always stay, etched into the fabric of who I was. But scars are proof of survival, not just of pain. I learned that betrayal doesn't define you, how you rise from it does. Marissa taught me what love is not. Damon taught me what greed destroys. June taught me what love truly is. And I, Elias Rowan, learned that revenge is never about destroying others. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. If you've walked with me this far, through every betrayal, every wound, every moment of fire, then I need one last thing from you. Hit the hype button right now. YouTube only lets you use it 3 times a week, and this story deserves to be one of them. Hype it, like it, subscribe, and share it, because people need to know that betrayal doesn't have to be the end. Survival can be the greatest revenge of all.